ZOOMCAST. Now live. Log in and check it out at Grima.
We are on live. Welcome everybody to episode 11 of this humble little Zoomcast we've been doing right throughout lockdown. I'm Matt Grima, and today, geez, the guests just keep getting better and better. I've got one of Melbourne's best in the buyer's advocate game. I speak, of course, of good friend and industry colleague, Cate Bakos. Cate, welcome.
I'm so humbled. That's the coolest intro ever. Thank you.
I think the DJ drop was via that app Fiverr, which I haven't heard of, but that's a beauty, that.
Yeah, it is.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm actually happily exhausted. I've had two almost back-to-back days now of crazy inspections. How happy are we though? I've never been so happy to be so busy.
It's amazing, isn't it? I was a little apprehensive. I only asked you to do this a couple of days ago, and I thought, geez, given how busy everybody's immediately going to become, I might have bitten off more than I can chew to get you on here on a Tuesday night, but I appreciate you giving us some time and jumping on.
Oh, I'm rapt to be on board. I'm really touched.
Now, you're right, Cate, the real estate industry was absolutely rejoicing on Sunday. Now, the man himself didn't mention real estate in any facet, but then we quickly trawled through all of the alerts that were popping through various media organisations, and we were quick to learn that private one-on-one buyer inspections are back. And You've never seen an industry happier to get back on the road.
Yeah, very true. So Sunday was strange. I was sitting there watching. You put everyone else on hold. Wait, Dan's coming on, and we're listening to every single word. And when we got towards the end of it, and then he threw on the health guys, I was like, "You are joking." We're all a bit grumpy, and the texts were flying. And then I had a phone call from a journo, and they said, "Oh, it's not good. What do you think this means?" And "Oh no, wait a minute. We've got a press release." And I said, "I don't believe you. Send it through." And she texted it, and that thing obviously went viral between all of us very quickly, the press release, because they didn't say the words at all on tally, and we were allowed our one-on-ones again. And a lot of people have been pushing really hard and hounding our minister's office for a long time, and it's been a very painful wait for vendors and buyers in particular. So it's not just the real estate agents that are being celebratory about it all, because we've had clients that have been pretty stressed as well. There's two types of buyers. There's what you might call the aspirational buyer that might see some value in the market and want to take advantage of that, and we get that. But we as an industry, I think, hand on heart, we're wanting to open the doors to those that actually needed to buy or sell or move. There are a lot of people that had sold a piece of real estate and were getting quite antsy or nervous that I'm going to be stuck. I don't know where I'm going to go next. I can't see what the next step looks like because of this lockdown. And it created a lot of stress, and, fingers crossed the valve's been released, so to speak, and people can start getting out there and looking at property and making some property decisions. Yeah, so true, because relying on a video and making even a rental decision, it's generally a 12-month fixed lease that someone would sign up for. No one wants to go into that thinking I might just break the lease. That's, a lot of expense and frustration and double moving, if nothing else. So this is very welcome news. Yeah,
absolutely. I don't know about you, Cate, but a lot of our information seemed to alter and change until we had some absolute finality from the REIV. We heard initial whispers that stylists and furniture removalists and what have you couldn't get access to property, and then we were quick to learn that may still be able to happen as the days and weeks progress. So you'll start to see a lot of new listings come onto the market. I've already seen it. I relaunched a property on Sunday night once I heard the good news, and I was top billing in Elwood for an apartment, and then I looked again on Monday and I was 9th in the order. Wow. So you get to see the volume that's coming back onto the market pretty quickly, and that's going to be a good thing for those looking to buy and sell.
Yeah, definitely. And I've got agents that obviously have vendors who are quite anxious to get their property marketed, and with the queues and the delays for floor plans and photographs and getting it online, they're not mucking around. They're just sending us listing schedules and all of the the forthcoming auctions. So we call those pre-markets. They're not off market because they are coming to market. Yeah. We're just getting a bit of an insider's look at it early. And there's a lot. We've got all of that spring volume that we're expecting. We're all put on hold for 10 weeks. And so we'd expect to see it banking up and coming back on.
Definitely. And I think, Kate, and I'll get your take on your expectation for the balance of 2020, but I can only assume from a Marshall White perspective, our perspective, that, geez, it's going to be head down, bum up almost until Christmas lunch, I reckon. And then perhaps January might even be a different month in 2021, given travel restrictions and people still needing to buy and sell real estate. So I think we're up for a busy couple of months, that's for sure.
Yeah, you raise a really great point. With one-on-one inspections, what could ordinarily be done in half an hour, let's say you have, you know what it's like, you've got a really good campaign going and you might have your first open and a really popular property when you've got no limitations on people through the door, really good campaign, could pull anything in excess of 30 groups. I mean, that's a stellar number, but it's not off the dial. Yeah. And I've heard agents talk about 40-something groups. Now, even if you've got 20 groups, if they're now 15 minutes apart, 20 groups, that's 5 hours worth of inspecting for an agent to stand there at the door and take what would normally be just a half an hour's task. The volumes that we're dealing with in terms of just inspection segments are huge, absolutely huge. And I'm saying to all of our buyers, set up your appointments, but you be on time, make sure your mask ready to go, you're in and out, 10 minutes, take your notes. We all have to be so regimented now to get the most out of this. And there's no time for checking out stuff that you're half-hearted about or that you're not really keen on, but let's just have a squeeze. There's none of that. Agents haven't got time for it. And neither have buyers. They've got a finite amount of time to really go and see property quickly. I've never seen anything like it. It's been quite mad. And I think we will be like this, working long hours. I know some agents that are, 7:30 to 7:30. I certainly have been for 2 days. When that changes and we're allowed to have inspections open for inspections again, the way that they did it last time was a restricted number of people inside a property at any one time. So we have to be prepared for that. So we'll still have, phase 1 and phase 2 where people are standing outside waiting to be the second group of 10, etc. Yep. And I think you're right. I do think that we will be trading in our January holidays and doing a bit of real estate instead.
Yeah. Well said, Kate. There are plenty of people that know you and know if you tune into a Channel 7 or a Channel 9 news on a Saturday afternoon, you might see a Kate on Sky News.
I wish.
If you're an avid podcast listener, Kate's got her own podcast, which is an absolute beauty, which I'll get you to plug in a sec. Kate, talk me through your journey through the ranks through to what you actually do day to day today. There are a lot of people, of course, that understand what a buyer's advocate does and what their role is. And there'll be a lot of people that may have heard of the term, but may not have necessarily engaged one in the past or have used one in the past. Give me the full story, Kate. Where did it all begin?
Wow. It all began, I had a fascination with property when I should have been studying chemistry. Yeah. I did an honours degree at Monash and finished in 1996. And I remember in my final year, I was meant to be working in the lab and I did air sensitive chemistry. So it was all very controlled and fume hoods and all that kind of stuff. And I was in the lab doing my work, but I was also tracking auction results and checking out locations and avidly saving my first deposit because I bought my first property when I was young. So there was a fascination, and for me it represented choice and freedom, and I just love the there's an art and a science to it. So there's lots of things that can't be governed by rules and science. And there's lots of things, that are all about understanding human behaviour and emotions. And then, as you know, there's some things you just can't explain. You can never replicate an auction and get the same result. Whereas in chemistry, you replicate your experiment, you're meant to get the same result. And once you can get a consistent result, you've got the right formula, you've designed, the right outcome, but in property, you can never do that. You could auction a property on Saturday, you could delay the auction and auction it on Sunday, and while it's not something that you can run twice, you could get a different result.
Yep.
You can just never know. So they're the things I love about it, the unpredictability, but also its ability to be analysed. So I finished my chemistry degree, I went into industry. I was a chemist, honestly. Your heart's got to be in something to be good at it. And I absolutely loved property, and I was probably a bit shy early on. So the idea of going into property sales in my early 20s would have just been too much for me to bear.
Yep.
But I went into property in my late 20s, and I started in Sandringham and worked with a lovely team. I had a great boss, and all of the people in the office were guys. So I was the only girl and I was the youngest, and I learnt a lot. And I learnt how vendors' emotions ride that roller coaster, and I learned a lot about buyer behaviour and about the skill that has to be exercised to have things running smoothly and professionally. Sure. But you can never ever, plug a vendor or a buyer's emotions into a grid and expect that they'll be, at this position at this time in the campaign, because everyone's different. Everyone has their own things that terrify them and agitate them. So that was one thing I loved about property. And when I had my little girl, when she was on the way, I knew that I couldn't keep working in the industry because, as you know, it's all the time. It's around the clock. 7 days a week, you're always on. You're always on. And I wanted to focus on being a mama. And I did mortgage broking. So for 4.5 years, I was a mortgage broker. And I chose that because I knew I could have a degree of flexibility and still stay really close to residential property and still have clients and still guide people, which is what I love.
Yep.
And so that was great. And it was one of the hardest jobs I've had. It was a very, very good apprenticeship. I worked through the GFC. I learned to deliver bad news, which is a horrible thing, but I had to master that and work out a way to sensitively deliver bad news and try and work around solutions or have someone accept, that's we've looked at every single option and that is it. So now we've got to look at what we've got and make the best decisions we can. And I think that equipped me to be a pretty good advocate, particularly understanding cash flow, lending policy, tax deductibility, loan structuring, and just how banks look at property as well. Banks don't just look at people, they look at property. And I learnt all about the assets that banks say no to or ask 50 billion questions about. And by the time Gab started Kinder, I was busting to get back into real estate. And I knew that I had more confidence and more skill and a better ability to talk to investors and to be in a role that guided people through property. And I really did love working with buyers. So the rest is history. I had to think up the perfect role for me, and it was representing buyers and guiding investors on a journey. And 11 years later, here we are.
Unbelievable. Kate, there's a fair bit to unpack in that. So I might touch on your career as an estate agent first. So how long were you an estate agent for, and what was your role day to day?
I was working in a real estate office as an agent for 2 years, and my role was to look after vendors. So to list and sell property. I didn't start as an assistant.
Yes.
And that was daunting. I remember my boss saying, well, you're a smart girl, you have the passion for it, you know what you're doing, we're here to help you.
Yeah.
But here's your desk, where's your phone? That was kind of how it went. And I loved it. I got to meet some amazing people, and it can be a very hard role. For anyone who thinks real estate's easy, they're kidding themselves. It's a very challenging role, and sometimes mentally and emotionally it can be a bit of a devastating role, because you and I both know people can assume the worst or think that you're just there to flog a property or that you're not trustworthy, and that's really hard for someone who runs on trust.
Yeah.
A lot of real estate agents just want to be liked. It's a people business. You wouldn't go into it if you didn't love the idea of hanging out with people all day. Yeah. So when someone brushes you off at the door, or doesn't want to take your phone call, or is dismissive or rude to you, or lumps you into a category because they've had a bad experience and been burnt by an agent in the past, I actually really struggled with that, Matt. I found that lack of respect and that willingness to judge you before getting to know you really hard. And we're in a service industry. And I guess it's up to anyone who goes into a service industry to prove that they can serve their customers well, but you've got to be given a chance.
Yeah, 100%. Well said, Kate. There'll be a lot of agents that'll be tuning into this that'll just be nodding along saying, yeah, we understand that perspective. There's plenty of good, but you're probably starting from a low base in terms of a level of trust or an opinion of the profession. And then it's only once you've dealt with somebody and had a positive experience, which happens 8 or 9 times out of 10 in my time, that people go, oh, he or she are actually a good person. They're a family person, or they're trying to do the best by that particular client at that particular time. And I think the experience tends to help with the reputation of the industry. But until you have the experience, you might have heard from a friend's uncle and might have a different view on the world. Kate, I asked the question about what you did as an estate agent day to day because I was wondering whether there was a specific affinity with the buyer side of real estate that's led you to become so bloody good at what you do. So you essentially, as the owner of Cate Bakos property and the principal buyer's advocate, help people buy pieces of real estate. It doesn't get much more complicated than that on the surface, but there's a lot of layers underneath it, isn't there?
Yeah, there's heaps of layers, and you're advising them on a technical result. You're paying attention to what their roadblocks might be as well. And people come to a buyer's agent for a variety of reasons. There's like a top 5. The first one, everyone assumes they're time poor, so you're dealing with some high court judge or a surgeon or someone who has no time. That's not the main driver or the main reason for people to come to people like me. Typically people are terrified about stuffing it up, and it's a lot of money, and stamp duty is expensive if you need to reverse a bad decision. So that enormous fear of making a huge financial mistake is a very strong reason why people will come to an advocate. They might come to me because they're really reluctant to deal with real estate agents, and that might be a perception that agents are just there to rip them off or to lie to them. Sure. Or it might be that they've had a bad experience, or it could just be that they know they're out of their depth from a negotiation point of view, and nobody would disagree with that. I mean, agents are some of the finest negotiators you'll get. They're doing it day in, day out with enormous sums of money, and the good ones, the senior ones, my goodness, they would give anyone a challenge. So when a buyer comes to me, it says, well, I want someone who understands the game, the jargon, the fair price to pay. That's another reason why people come to me. So they just want to rely on my insight and expertise and ability to conduct comparable sales analysis and get it right. Yeah. There are so many reasons why. Sometimes there's lots of stakeholders and they just want to take out, be a bit impartial about it, or take out the influences that they're getting from the backseat of the car. Yeah. I want to unpack 2 of those, Kate. So the first one is the justification process. So we think it's a good house. We like this street. We like this location. But hey, we've never lived in this suburb before. We don't really know. We're moving because we're going to expand our family or be closer to work now, or whatever the case may be. I need someone to justify that my decision is correct. So let's go to a professional that does this day in, day out from a buying perspective and get their take on it as to ascertain whether I'm making the right decision or not. So I get that justification factor for sure. What about, and I'm sure you have them because they exist in every industry, but what about the person that thinks, I'm going to employ an advocate because an advocate's going to get me the deal of the century. They're going to sniff out the off-market opportunity that no one's heard about. They're going to find me the needle in a haystack. What about that buyer? I can do needle in a haystack. Yep. I know how to do that. I know who to ask and how to gear them up to be super, super patient. Yep. And you and I both know, because I had a needle in a haystack brief. I knew it was out there because this will take a while. The elements that you want exist, but that type of property, its frequency on the market would be 1 to 2 times a year. So that means, on the balance of averages, we're probably working together for at least 6 months, but probably a year. That's a long assignment. They were beautiful clients. I was happy to do it. And you and your buddy found us the property, which was very special. But those we can do. The discount, the bargain, they're the wrong questions to ask an advocate. So my goal is to get the best property for the client that matches their brief. Sometimes it will surprise them in a really fantastic way. If I can get them a discount on the appraised value, that's an even bigger tick. That's awesome. And that's the holy grail. We always want to do that. And depending on the time of the market timing, market forces, the vendor's position, the agent's skill, the agent's willingness to push hard, all of those things can create a situation where I might buy at a discount. But going for a property or choosing an advocate because of only a discount, that's a terrible idea. And I say all the time, if you want a bargain, I can absolutely find you a bargain. I could get you a bargain price on something and really push it down, but it might be a really undesirable property that has no limited sale prospects and hindered growth prospects. And that's not the holy grail. That's a terrible idea. Yeah. So the idea is making sure that you hold them accountable to their brief. And I often say to people, we're not doing that. We are not buying that property. It might be because it's got an obvious compromise and I'm concerned about its growth or the future resale value or their ability to sell it if they have to move quickly. But more often than not, it's because they've told me what they need, or they've told me why they're selling or why they've sold their other house. And then they go for something with the same fundamental flaw or the same missing element. And that's not, my job is to challenge them and say no. And I say to everyone, it's the stuff that we say no to that makes our selections good selections. It's that John West principle, you know, the fish that you throw away, you know, that's really important. Yeah. So it's a role that involves a lot of psychology, and not in a manipulative way, but in a partnership way. If someone wants a relationship, it has to be collaborative. Trust has to be there. They have to be able to question me as well. I want someone to feel completely free to say, Kate, I'm not comfortable, or I don't like this one, or why did you choose that, or why didn't you show me this? That's a good thing. You've got to be able to question your advocate and know that you're in a safe space to do so. Yeah. Well said. Kate, we're having a few internet difficulties, but we'll just push through. So I'm sorry if I'm chopping up or you're chopping up. Tell me, and this might lead into a personal experience that you and I had together, and you were touching on it earlier, but what do you think are some of the keys to a good advocate and agent relationship? Obviously, it's important for both sides of the fence to get along and have some mutual respect in a professional sense for one another. At the end of the day, both are trying to achieve a fair and reasonable outcome for their client, and that can be based on a variety of factors. But as one of the best advocates in the game, what would you say 2 or 3 of the most important factors that will establish a good long-term advocate-agent relationship? Oh, I love this question. The first one is be prepared to stand in their shoes and let them stand in your shoes. And the best way to get in someone's shoes is to understand a bit about the shoes. So I might say to you, how do you think your vendor will react to this offer? I'm not saying is it high enough or low enough. You might need to sit down with them and present it carefully. They might need to on a contract straight up, which I think is always the right way to do it. But sometimes agents need to talk about the concept of an offer first. They need to understand what sort of time frame is around that offer. If the vendor will respond well to a time-stamped offer because they need to make a quick decision and that might be the thing that gets them moving, great. But if they're having a hard time getting together, or if they genuinely need a few days to talk it out, or they've got other stakeholders in the family, the dumbest thing I could do is timestamp it and, hold a gun at your head and stamp my feet and try and push it through quickly. I need to understand who else is in the game and how you're going to deal with them. And that's just a question. So I think, in answer to your former question, the first one is be prepared to ask some questions, and not difficult questions, just how are you going to play it? What's your style? How will you deal with competitive offers if that arises? The next thing is being prepared to have a firm push back on price. If you believe, in a particular value, or you're wanting to do the best for your client, you're not there to get blood from a stone or to leave, a trail of destruction, but you are there to get a great deal for your side, because I know a good agent will be getting in the ring with the gloves on, having it out with me, and then when the fight's over and the price is decided on, we shake hands, and that's a fair and respectful fight. But sometimes you can sense when you're not aligned on price, and it's not about fighting or winning or negotiating. It's actually that the agent might have a different perception of value to what I do, and I might be missing something, or they might be missing something, because at the end of the day, we're stepping into valuer's shoes then, and valuations are very subjective. So that's when we have to sit down and say, here are my comparable sales, and this particular sale and these two over here, that's what's leaning me to think that anything above XYZ is paying a premium, and I don't want to pay a premium. Which bit am I missing? And you guys might say, well, that was a bargain result where we were there at that auction, or you're missing the fact that, you know, the overlay, or there's an easement across this, because at the end of the day, an agent will more likely be expert in their area than the advocate. Yeah. I know Yarraville inside out. I live here, but do I know Yarraville as well as the Yarraville-based agents that only work at Yarraville? I mean, I have to be a market generalist. So you sometimes have to ask the burning question about some comparable sales to really get the inside running on what drove that particular result at that time. Because as I said earlier, you know, you can have an auction a second time and you won't get the same result.
Yeah, Kate, it could be a number of factors. So the person who bought one piece of real estate might have had to have bought that particular house because their mother-in-law lived in the street. She's 92, she's unwell, and they were willing to pay a premium at that point in time in the market to buy that particular home, and now it's thrown the comparable sales out of whack. And if you don't know that inside story from an estate agent or from an advocate, and you just see it purely on a list on paper as one piece of data, you're going to have a very different opinion as to what something may or may not be worth. You make a couple of really good points, Kate, and I think it comes back to professional courtesy and communication, and also realising that this is never going to be a one deal scenario. You are going to, in 2 weeks' time, you're going to see a new listing on the market, and guess who's going to have that listing? It's going to be that same agent that you just had a pretty tough negotiation with 2 weeks ago. And by the same token, on the other side, guess who's going to be walking through your open for inspection? Hey, it's that advocate that you just got in the ring with to have a bit of fun and negotiate. So you want to make sure that when you leave that particular negotiation, as you absolutely said, you feel like you've genuinely done the right thing by all parties concerned, but there's a healthy level of respect that when you see each other out and about, you've got a friendly professional courtesy that's going to continue for many years to come.
There's something about a hard negotiation that I always have to bring back to people's, you know, mindsets, including my staff. And that is, once the property is purchased, if it's the right property and it fits the criteria, the client will always remember how much they loved the property and how overjoyed they were to get it. And if they pushed to their limit, or if they had a stretched budget and they had to use every bit of it, we've done everything we can to preserve that. But at the end of the day, it was there on the table if they needed it. So if they needed a bit more power to their punch on auction day, it was there. And they never lament that. I've never had someone come back and say, oh, I know that we would have loved to get it for 1.2, but you told us, you know, in the day before auction, if we have to go to 1.23, that extra 30 grand is not a bad idea. You can still see value. They never say that. They always say, we love our house. We're so glad that you encouraged us to go to auction with that budget. And that's what it's all about.
Yeah. There's something nice, Kate, as agents, and this can be a misconception, that the agent is always setting the price, or the agent's got the final say on things like the price guide or the parameters surrounding the sale. And that's not always the case. Often an agent will be chosen to represent the seller because of the relationship they have, but the seller very much wants to dictate what happens from a quote perspective, a price guide perspective, and a reserve price perspective. Yeah. And as agents, our job is to guide, help, educate, assist in that particular person making the right decision at that point in time. I think there's nothing wrong, though, with an agent saying to be it a really good buyer that they've got a strong relationship with, or of course a buyer's advocate, hey, I've got a vendor here that's probably gotten a little excited about how things are progressing in terms of the level of anticipated competition coming, and I just want to let you know on the side that this may do a little bit better than anticipated from the get-go. So you'd be best off prepping your client that if we do get to auction day, A, there's likely to be some competition, and B, this auction could be quite competitive. I'm just giving you a heads up. it's a nice thing to know before you go into it.
Yeah, we would be foolish and remiss if we didn't pick up the phone and have a chat to the agent through a campaign. And you know how it goes. I nag you. I tap into you every week, and then come Thursday, you know, when are you seeing your vendors? When's your vendor meeting? You want to know from that pre-auction meeting, what's the likely reserve price? You might not, or what agents don't always know, because vendors hold the right to decide their reserve price before, when the bell rings for the auction day. I mean, it can be that late. They'll have a general idea, or they'll know what they're recommending on the balance of the information that they've received throughout the campaign. Agents know what the comparable sales are. Sometimes it's hard to peg a comparable, especially if the property is super rare. But generally they'll know where it could be. But when you've got very unusual market forces, and fair to say the last 20 months we've had crazy headwinds from all directions. I've never seen a market so volatile in such a short space of time. The federal election, we could kind of see that coming. We could see what was driving that. But coronavirus, like, no one woke up on New Year's Day in 2020 and said, this year we're going to have a pandemic. It's just taken us all by storm. Yeah. So you don't know. And the onus is on the buyers. And I know a lot of buyers struggle with that conversation. They think the agent will talk in riddles or won't tell them. The more direct the question, the more direct the answer. I generally find that. Do you know what the reserve is? If the answer is no, do you have a recommendation, or do you have a firm idea of where you think the reserve should be, or what I can reasonably expect as a buyer? If you're in my shoes, how much would you try and have in your pocket? They're direct questions, closed questions. I think buyers would be surprised to know that agents will give them a hint, and it's up to them to take the hint. But you can ask questions like, how many groups have you had through? How many people have asked for a contract? How many building inspections have you had? When you've got those questions, or even, have you had any requests for unusual terms or long settlements? If the agent has had requests for flex to the terms, you know that they've probably got a bidder, because no one's going to muck around asking for flex unless they're going to bid. So they're the things that can prep a buyer to understand what the competitive bidding will be like. And if you think there's 3 or more bidders, you've got a contest you need to prep. Yeah,
well done. Cate, sort of an interesting question relating back to how people make a decision to engage an advocate. As an estate agent, I think it's probably becoming more difficult as legislation gets tighter and what have you to prove your worth from the reserve was this, we sold it for this, therefore we're the best agent because. How does a buyer's advocate prove their worth to a potential prospect that's considering using an advocate? So if somebody said, Cate, why would I employ an advocate? I've been living in the area for 20 years. I know the market pretty well. I can probably guess within a couple of 50 grand what this property might be worth. Why should I engage an advocate?
Yeah, that's a very, very good question, because I can't demonstrate how much of a discount I got on a property, unless it's really obvious that I got an absolute steal. I can direct people to have a look at my gallery page and say, have a look at the types of property that I'm buying and the volume of property that I buy and the breadth of our city and regions that I cover. I think that independent reviews, so like Google reviews, they count for a lot, and I absolutely pride myself on that. And for every client that's given me a Google review, I'm very, very grateful, because that's a superb thing to be able to point to. But I think referrals from people that know what I've done, I get a lot of referral business. Being able to talk about what you do and show how passionate you are, like what we're doing now, that does go a long way. And sometimes people will see me bidding, and if they were impressed with how I was confident in an auction, or might have taken control of or perceived control of something. I mean, the auctioneer is always the person in control. But if you're not fearful and you're on your game and your bids are really clear and people are feeling a little bit intimidated, you've done a good job as a bidder. But that's not all we do. What they don't see is all of the behind the scenes analysis, being spot on with my pricing, being able to address all of the questions that come up when buyers are scared or nervous or trying to get their partner on the same page. That's the work that's just so intangible and difficult to explain. So word of mouth is so important. But I think for anyone contemplating a buyer's agent, believe it or not, the audience that they could definitely talk to, certainly to get some really good information about a buyer's agent, are the agents, the selling agents. And I say to people, you know, I'm not afraid to suggest that you chat to agents in the area that you're active in.
Yep.
And ask them, you know, what do you think of buyer's agent, and who would you recommend, or what do you think of Cate? Because the agents do see how hard I work for my clients, and they see that I am congenial. You've said that yourself, and you have to be, because we're all working towards the same thing. We're trying to match two people on a property so that a transaction can be done and both parties are happy. That's 100%. What it's all about.
I asked that question, Cate, because I had a lead in, of course. So my best mate in the world, and a guy who's like my brother, who has been my best mate for 30 plus years, and his wife, two incredibly intelligent, busy, professional people, but no qualms or queries about that. Super good at what they do for a living. Skeptical's too strong of a word, but I don't think in their initial property search that a buyer's advocate was ever really on the agenda. They probably knew of some advocates or what an advocate might do, but initially I think they felt really comfortable and confident that they could find themselves the right family home. When I quickly ascertained where they were likely to be looking and what sort of price point they were wanting to play in, me, as a fully fledged listing and selling agent, recommended that you become their buyer's advocate. And I made that recommendation because, well, for a number of reasons, but they're two very busy professional people, so they're time poor. So that's one of the factors you mentioned. They've just had a little bub, so that makes them even more time poor. And they wanted some justification on what they were buying and where they were buying it, in addition to some of the links and relationships that you have, particularly in your part of town, but you've got great relationships, Cate, all over the state, that could then assist them or show some value in their eventual buying process. And you're able to help them very well. They got a good buy and they're wrapped.
We kept them over our side of the bridge. We were never going to let them leave us. They were beautiful, really gorgeous clients.
Yeah. Well done. Lastly, from me, Cate, and thanks again for giving me a bit of time tonight. What are you seeing or anticipating the market's going to look like for the balance of 2020 from a price perspective? Are there a couple of suburbs or areas in mind that you think you're going to target as an advocate that you see some growth coming out of, or are you more client-based, specific on their requirements rather as to what they're looking for?
Awesome questions. First one, I think we will see strong transaction volumes because we've got lots of buyers and we've got lots of sellers, and the buyers are prepped and ready to go. They've been following all of our directives, getting their finance ready. Finance is still tricky, but the scrutiny is easing, and we know that we've got potential easing and servicing buffers and a credit loosening next year. So a formal credit loosening with legislative changes. That will be a game changer, and it could trigger a little bit of a run. If anything, I'm moderately nervous about that, but I understand the rationale for it. We're in a recession and they would like to get us out of that as soon as possible. We've got record low interest rates, and that really is the fundamental driver at the moment, because I have a lot of naysayers saying, well, we've got really high unemployment and it will only get higher, which is true. But even when your unemployment is 10%, your employment is 90. And if we look at full employment, granted it's not 90, but for all of the people that are in full employment who want to buy a house, they're pretty revved up and they've got some really strong borrowing capacity. And if the number of buyers is greater than the number of sellers, that will put a price under, a force under property prices, and we'll see some price movement. I anticipate that we will see price movement. And into 2021, and pending how well we kick Corona and manage dealing with this virus, I believe that we'll continue to see price growth into next year. What is interesting is how the market is skewing itself. We've got a bit of a resistance on part of buyers to go for small apartments, and they've been a little bit on the nose for a long time, but more so now, especially little one-bedders, boxes in the sky. So I feel for developers, because that segment of the market I don't see growth opportunity for.
Agree.
We're definitely seeing regional changes, and I know that because my phone goes hot a lot. We've got tree changers wanting from Dalesford to Castlemaine to Bendigo to Ballarat to Geelong to Surf Coast. It's quite mad.
Can I pause you there, Kate? Do you think that the pandemic and people living through lockdown, homeschooling, pressures on financial situation, emotional stress, etc., are leading people to think about, not to get too woo-woo about this, but people are starting to think about what's most important to them in life, and it could be things like living close to grandparents, or living close to parents, or having family and friends close by, as opposed to career, job, move, live, etc.
Interesting. Not so much the close by. I get that you'll always get a handful of people saying want to be closer to the grandies or whatever.
Yep.
We're seeing a change and people being happy to move further out because of a work from home desire and a work from home arrangement. They've proven to their bosses that they can be trusted. They've proven to themselves that it can be done, but ideally they'd love to have 2 living areas or 3 studies or whatever it might be. We're seeing that particular change. And in addition, people are taking stock of debt levels and saying, I would really love a bit less debt. So if you sell your property in the city and you move to the country and you pocket a little bit and reduce your debt, then for some who can do it, it feels fantastic. Yeah. What I will say is this mass exodus that everyone's talking about, it's not happening. There are those of us that still want to stay living in the city, and things like this can often be seen as partly a fad. So for some it will work and they'll stay. For others, they'll do it and say, what on earth was I thinking? It might be a fad, and there could be a reversal of that decision. So as hot as the regions feel right now, it's not sustainable for everybody. And I say to so many people, why don't you try before you buy? So think about renting your property out, go and live in wherever it is that you want to be, Woodend, Castlemaine, and rent for a year and try the commute, and tell yourself how you feel about being on a train that might be a 2-hour trip each way, and you could have, train line works or breakdowns or service cancellations, because it happens, and it needs to be part of your lifestyle, and you need to accept it.
Yeah, it's really good advice, Kate. Do you miss the cut and thrust of a public auction? Have you enjoyed working in the way we've worked in this private one-on-one? Sarah Wood, who was on one of these episodes, made a really good point. She said we feel like we're subcontractors at the moment almost, where it's been so long since I've stood with a team at an auction or an open for inspection, and you miss that camaraderie and bouncing off people. Do you miss the cut and thrust of auction day? Yeah,
I do, very much so. And there are pros and cons to everything. I mean, the pros to one-on-ones is you get a bit of a chance to chat to the agent, because they're not fielding other buyers at the door, but you've only got a 10 or 15 minute window, choppity chop.
Yeah.
The auction thing is fantastic. I mean, auction is such an art form, and you're out in a public space, you've got a chance to do your thing. And for me, that is, thinking forward about how I'll bid and who I'll be staring at in the crowd, and when I'll break down the bidding, and whether there are any tactics. Those things, your mind's just buzzing. It's great. It's different on Zoom, and some auction platforms don't even have face-to-face. You've literally got, just a board up with numbers. It's literally like eBay. There's not a lot of skill in that. You've just got to not miss pressing the button.
Yeah.
But when you are like this, it is quite powerful, and a lot of buyers are terrified of it for the right reasons, because in a public auction scenario, I can read body language to a degree, but I might be 20 metres away from them. So I've got to look out for when they swallow, or when their shoulders slump, or when they start talking to their partner, or, when they get that stunned look on their face. But on Zoom, I can see everything.
Yeah.
And so reading the play when you're up against someone whose face is there on your 17-inch screen, that's powerful. So there's pros and cons. But do I miss the team and the fraternity feel? Absolutely. Not just my own team and being able to ask each other silly questions all day, every day, but bumping into the agents and seeing them with their buddies as well. It's very, very different. And, if we didn't love this and love the people we work with, we wouldn't do it.
Yeah, spot on. Kate, you're a marvel. You're, as I said, I don't say it lightly, you're one of the best in the game in the advocacy space. You've got a huge following of people that have done business with you. You've got great respect from a lot of agents particularly at Marshall White, and I know in the broader fraternity as well. Cate, if somebody's looking to employ you as an advocate, or maybe pick your brain for a little bit of property advice, or even jump on your award-winning podcast, where can they go?
They can contact me. They can just find my website, Cate Bakos. I'm Kate with a C.
Yep.
If they want to ask me any questions, just shoot me an email. I'd love to answer a question or steer you in the right direction or give you some homework. And if you're wanting to tap into some property listening, I record a podcast with two clever guys in the industry, Dave Johnson and Pete Kalizos, the academic university professor and very clever financial whiz. And that's called The Property Planner, Buyer and Professor. And I also have a website that's more of a conversation portal called The Property Diaries, and I interview people for a few episodes and have a few mini series there on whatever they do in our exciting industry.
Yep. Well done. Now, this will be on iTunes, it'll be on Spotify, it'll be on Instagram as well. Kate, you're a star. I appreciate you giving us some time.
I'm so humbled.
Good on you.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
It's been a pleasure.
We'll speak soon.
See you later.